No, you don't! Oh, crap.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the world of Hellboy, the Science of Evil. As you just saw, this game was developed by Chrome Studios, the creators of Blade Kitten, based on a popular webcomic, or semi-popular, and Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. We're going to mess with the brightness real quick and the menus, which are based on Hellboy's rather worn case file, as you can see.
Knock, knock.
We won't be seeing one of those guys again for quite a while. These tiny little creatures right here are called Bambini, and they are the witch's puppets. If you're wondering why they have handles on their head, that's because when thrown they explode. They are the weakest enemies in the game, and they can be grabbed without being weakened first, though they do take quite a few hits from Hellboy's fists. Throwing an enemy up into the air and then smashing them restores all of your health. Although it's not very easy to get hit in this game, when you do get hit, it does cause rather large amounts of damage. The game's combat system relies on the basic, light, heavy attack system. You use light attacks and you use heavy attacks in between them to spice things up. There are only a few combos listed in the menu, though you can figure out many for yourself that aren't listed. It takes quite a bit of while to discover them all, though whether you actually do depends on your patience. When an enemy is glowing, like that Bambini in the corner right there, it means that regardless of their state of health, they can be grappled and thrown into the air. You might notice I leap into the air and slam down a lot. That's because that attack tends to scatter enemies and also feels extremely satisfying even if it does very little damage. So you're probably going to see me doing that a whole lot.
Wonder why the travel brochures leave out this part.
He should not wonder, just depart.
But I just got here. I'm starting to get the feeling you're avoiding me.
He avoids himself, not she.
Yeah, you. You're not all that subtle, lady. You might get away with ransacking 1 or 2 occult collections, but 7 kinda grabs our attention. And what you left behind wasn't exactly a thank you note.
She takes, but always gives.
Nice. Real stocking fillers. Thrilled everyone to death. But this is where we stop this fun little chase. I'm out of breath, and you're out of time. Now don't you go getting any ideas.
Does not.
I wouldn't. Are you trying to make me look bad? Okay, let's try again.
We now have access to Hellboy's Good Samaritan, his rather large pistol. You can only fire 1 round at a time, though it is extremely powerful, at least early on in the game. It's capable of destroying a Bambini in 1 hit. There is quite a bit of reload time, even if it does not appear so, and you cannot fire immediately after you have already fired. There are a lot of objects to punch through and throw out of the way. A lot. You can aim, as the game just explained, using a reticle, but regardless of whether you aim the reticle, you still need to be facing an enemy or object to shoot at it. Alright, the witch barrier here serves as a tutorial for how throwing enemies into other objects work. All you need to do is grab a Bambini and hurl him right into the gate. Simple enough. So, we know so far that the witch has stolen something from an occult collection. Sorry, 7 occult collections. It's not exactly clear what, but it's something that sparked the BRPG's interest. Considering how many occultists Hellboy has run into over his time as a paranormal investigator, it's anyone's guess as to where or what she stole from. These cursed graves do not appear anywhere else in the game, if I recall correctly. You simply need to throw objects at them and they will explode and stop spawning enemies. I think this just serves as an extended tutorial into, how to throw enemies and objects into certain areas. As you notice, we're picking up quite a bit of objects from the background environment. What these objects do is act as weapons, which are significantly stronger than Hellboy's fists. The ones in this stage are incredibly weak, being made out of wood and easily crumbled stone, but the weapons we get later are far more durable. The game really wants to let you know how to grapple. All thrown objects do more damage than both the Samaritan, well, most thrown objects do more damage than both the Samaritan or any of Hellboy's attacks by himself. You don't really need to use objects early on in the game, but if you get used to just using Hellboy's fists and you encounter the enemies in the last few stages, you're going to be extremely frustrated because you will have no idea what you are doing. In place of these cursed graves in the multiplayer is something called a plinth, which is a crystal summoned up from the ground that needs to be stricken by a specific player in the cooperative mode. I think that is a little bit more involving for the player than the cursed graves, but, we'll see that eventually. This game's story supposedly had input directly from Mike Mignola, or at least influence, who created the Hellboy comics in the first place. Considering where the story does eventually go, that's not, out of the question, though the gameplay probably had very little to do with his involvement. That's not to say it's bad, it just, there's not a lot to creatively direct here. Right here is an ammo pouch where we can restock our many kinds of ammo eventually, simply by grabbing them with the R2 button like everything else. That ghost barrier over there, we're going to be seeing that a lot. We're going to be seeing that ghost barrier quite often. Alright, so the game obviously wants us to pick up that spear, or whatever you would like to call that pike. We're going to do that. Whenever you see ravens, that's a good sign you're about to fight the witch again. Or the first time, as it is this time. So, all the times you fight the witch, she works in the same basic fashion. She hurls items at you, and you hurl items back at her to destroy her. This time, I believe she only takes one strike. Those pumpkin bombs she throws do explode. She can also summon Bambinis by throwing them at you, but those are harder to throw back at her. Yep, as it says, we are going to go find the witch now. Most of this game is actually a witch hunt, now that I think about it, in a literal sense. You could not see it just there. Also, you cannot grapple enemies in a corner or in tight spaces. Do not try to grapple enemies in a corner or in tight spaces. You will only become frustrated. You could not see it just there, but when a Bambini grabs onto your back, you can hurl it off. It's not really, you know, something worth seeing more than once, but it's a neat little animation. Another door to smash through. All these boxes were breaking apart. You see these blue things flying out of them. They fill our meter, the little blue one under the orange one, which would be our health. What that meter does will become apparent later when the game decides to introduce it. Not so subtle foreshadowing about a future enemy right there. We cannot touch these graves. They have that green smog around them. We're going to come back to those graves later.
Don't bother.
Huh?
If you ain't got the password, don't waste your time.
I got this.
Well, that may unlock a lot of things, but this is just a gate. Cursed, sure, but a gate just the same.
Look, I need to get in there, and you're gonna let me.
I don't make the rules, pal. Curses weren't made to be broken, just lifted. Talk to the gatekeeper if you want out.
And where's he?
This is a cemetery, so take a wild guess.
Hey, you the gatekeeper?
Once?
Well, maybe you can give me the password to the gate out there. The lock has given me some lip.
The gate stays closed. I stay here. This is right.
I don't care if it's right. I gotta get through.
Not without my wife. She has been bound to this place by that evil creature. And I have not the strength to free her.
Let's see what I can do.
To break the bindings, you must channel your strength through the charm I keep in this crypt. Open my wife's tomb beneath the flightless angel, and the password is yours.
Yeah, like it's gonna be that simple.
I do really adore the voice acting in this game. Right here in this little coffin, there is a new type of ammo called Release. The Release unbinds those coffins with the green smog around them so we can rip them right open. And if you're just playing this, your first time through, you might think that's all they do. But they also act as a primitive scatter shot, able to hit more than one enemy at a time, and they do more damage to the witch's forces than the regular heavy rounds. Alright, right here we see that pressing L3 and R3 at the same time activates Hell Fury using that little blue meter I talked about. Using Hell Fury lets you attack faster, and it enables your attacks to stun enemies easilier. It only lasts for a very limited amount of time, but it is useful. And there is a way to extend the Fury meter, as you will see actually quite shortly, within a few minutes.
Okay, there you go.
You have our thanks. The word is yours.
Yeah, but what about the... Oh.
Alright, so before we head back over to the rather talkative gate, we have a small area over here. There's not a lot, but you know, why not show it off anyway? There's not a lot of goodies or collectibles in this game. There are a few, as you'll see shortly, but you shouldn't expect to find something by traveling off into a tiny area like this, other than more, you know, combat. Usually the reward for doing things in this game is more story, which is appropriate considering it's Hellboy.
So?
The gatekeeper says thanks.
That's what I was waiting for.
Alright, so here we have our first piece of lore. Lore and artifacts are what increases your little energy bubble, the Fury meter. And they also expand on the game's story and world a little bit. So we know that the witch has some reason for being furious with at least that wife. Her actions in this game so far would seem to be entirely malevolent, but that's usually not how it works in the world of Hellboy. She had some reason for being furious with the Gravekeeper's wife and presumably other people as well. Something that, you know, made her ransack occult collections, or perhaps she was driven to do that beforehand. Regardless of how it all stacks up, I doubt she's going to be very talkative toward Hellboy about her motives. That was pretty easy. We have another coffin to fling open here, and another door to smash. There are a lot of doors to smash. Excuse me while I struggle with smashing open a few crates. There we go. Alright, so here we're introduced to a new enemy type that isn't so easily removed as these Bambini here. The larger puppets take even more hits from Hellboy's fists, and they are easily stunned by the gun, but they are not easily destroyed by the gun. I should just call it this. Hurling objects at it is the best strategy, as is always the best strategy. Hurl objects at everything in this game. Just do it. That's how you win. The Samaritan has a tendency to send enemies flying for some reason on occasion. And again, if they do fly into a corner, do not try to grapple them. You will not be able to grapple them, you will just become frustrated. Shooting that one always feels extremely satisfying. Down here, it's obvious you're meant to smash this giant cracked wall, but you can run back here and punch a few coffins that are just protruding from the wall. You don't get anything for it, but, you know, why not? So from this diary we learn there are an apparent set of rules forced onto people by, supposedly, this witch, and breaking said rules creates dire consequences. It's not clear how many people were forced under the witch's supernatural rules, but at this point I think it's safe to say it's more than just a few. Yes, I realize it is dark and extremely hard to see, but it's not any better for me playing it. I do think that these games' graphics, in spite of the fact that it came out in 2007 and clearly does not have the best graphics, are not all that bad. There is a very clear style, a very clear aesthetic, and I think it works. Hellboy's attacks are rather flashy, they leave a streak of red behind, and the enemies all have very interesting designs. The environment, while, it is rather gloomy, is, very detailed, and areas do not seem the same as one another. Alright, it's time for a new enemy type. The werewolves are much sturdier than any of the witch's forces, though they could be a part of the witch's forces that's never directly explored. They gang up on you and they attack much quicker than the other enemies in this stage. It's your best bet to use a lot of heavy attacks to keep them away at all times. It is very easy to keep them at a distance in smaller numbers with your Good Samaritan, but they rarely attack in smaller numbers, being wolves. And there is the soon-to-become familiar screech of a ghost barrier being destroyed.
Nag.
Another thing I think is fairly good about this game's graphical design is that although it is an earlier game, it does not use set expressions for the characters during cutscenes. That may be due to motion capture, but every cutscene has, you know, its own new expressions, and an expression is never used more than once throughout the game. The movements of the enemies and the enemy animation, as well as Hellboy's own animation during combat, are actually rather surprisingly fluid as well. And I think that's a pretty big plus. You know, they feel a lot more lifelike than you would be led to believe. Another ghost barrier destroyed, more doors to punch. As this is by far the largest combat area in the first stage, or first chapter as it were, let's use this time to talk a little bit about Hellboy and why you should care about him as a character. Hellboy was conceived by Mike Mignola when he created an unrelated drawing of a demon with a belt that said Hellboy. The character does not resemble our Hellboy in any way, but he liked the name so much he decided to make something more of it. In part, Hellboy's conception was also due to the fact that Mike Mignola wished to create independent stories using his own characters rather than having to fit in characters that already existed. He pitched the idea of Hellboy to DC Comics originally, but they declined it and did not like that it had, you know, hell in it. Hellboy himself as a character was summoned to our realm by Nazi occultists, and promptly found by the Allied forces, who in part would form the BRPD. He was from there raised as a normal child into Catholicism, which is where his idea to name the Good Samaritan came from, though the gun is only named that in the movies. Hellboy, unlike the violent demeanor often associated with demons, is very good-humored, good-natured, and he will always help people who really need it, whether he has something to complain about or not. As we near the end of the chapter, let's discuss the story a little bit, or at least recap what happened. A witch has stolen objects from several occult collections for some reason. She has also been enforcing her will and rules on people in Romania, though exactly how many victims is unclear at this point. It's clearly more than just a few. It's also unclear why she is enforcing these rules, what these rules specifically are, and what it means to the people here. And of course, this being Hellboy, Hellboy is not just going to get any straight answers by asking her or by asking the spooky ghosts who may have been influenced by the witch. Perhaps the spooky ghosties and skeletons themselves have something to hide from Hellboy and are not explaining the extent of the story to him. This would be bad because when an investigator comes, he really needs the entire story to understand what exactly is going on and how to fix it. But if it were that simple, then this game wouldn't be nearly as interesting. We are confronted with our final ghost barrier here and a chance to put the release round to some good combat use, as you can see. Hardly our last ghost barrier, excuse me, this is our last ghost barrier of this chapter. We will encounter many, many more before our adventure is done. And now we have a second fight with the witch on our hands. Second verse, same as the first. We pick up objects and hurl them back at her. There aren't actually a lot of foreground objects in this little arena right here to hurl at her, so this time we're going to have to throw her own projectiles back at her. This is no more or less difficult than the other way around. It's just slightly less entertaining to hit her with her own pumpkin bombs than it is to hit her with, say, the stone cross, which I just slammed into the ground uselessly. As you just saw there, the larger puppets are extremely weak to the release rounds. This little pit right here is deceptively large. There is no double jump, there is no means to jump farther, though I find pressing square in the air does act as a good placebo. You simply need to time it very precisely, though dying has no real permanent effect. You simply restart at the nearest combat situation.
Hey, how do I get out of here? Thanks for nothing. Well, good morning, sunshine.
Insolent beast! Show some respect for Voldor, the great warrior king!
Sorry, I didn't recognize you.
I ask not for your tributes. I have had many, both willing and unwilling.
Well, good for you.
You are young and insolent, but your power is terrible and to be admired. It almost brings warmth to my cold and ancient bones.
So, about a way out.
Yes, the hunt. Let me not hinder your wrath, old demon.
Thanks.
I loved how horribly offended Voldor was when Hellboy dared to call him Sunshine. His face was just absolutely priceless.
Great. Bells. That's always good. What? Government work. B-10, this is Red. Come in, B. Can you hear me? I made it in. Missed the target site by a fraction. Just didn't miss everything. The weather boys are dead on, though. There's definitely something odd about the mist. Thicker than it looks. Pushing against me. Angry, maybe. On the plus side, my skin's staying on. Now I'm gonna hike in, see if I can reach high ground and check out the actual temperature. One day I'm gonna have to check out this private sector I keep hearing about.